Hello Year 9s, today we're going to move on from factors, multiples, and primes and move on to fractions. We did do fractions already this year, so it should be some kind of revision. However, fractions is super duper important for when we go to write our GCSEs and when we go to year 10 and year 11 and things like that, and they're just really important in life in general. So we're going to start talking about fractions this week. We're going to talk about equivalent fractions today, and then we're going to talk about mixed and improper fractions. So if you'd like to go ahead and get started, your title is Fractions, Equivalent, and Mixed/Improper. You can then go ahead and do these 10 questions in your exercise book. It'd be really good if you pause this video here now and do those questions, and then I will give you the answers. All right, there are the answers to the starter. So you can go ahead and mark those, ideally in green, but I mean in any color that you want as long as you've marked your work. All right, let's get started for today's lesson. All right, none of this is supposed to be new. It's all supposed to be things we've practiced before, so hopefully we will be all right with it. It says complete the equivalent fractions. In case you forgot, equivalent fractions are two fractions that mean the same thing. They're just made up of different numbers. So for instance, it says here we've got half of this circle colored in. Hopefully you can see that half of it has been colored in there. The top half of that circle has been colored in. But if I look at the orange part of it, I can see that there's been 2 pieces colored in out of 4. So 1/2 and 2 out of 4 are equivalent fractions. And I can show that they're equivalent because I can do 1 times by 2 to get to 2. And I can also do 2 times by 2 to get to 4. What about the next picture? So the next picture says that 1 out of 4 has been colored in, which is the same as having 2 pieces colored in out of 8. And the last one says it's like having 1/3 colored in. So I could split this into 3 pieces. And I have one of those 3 pieces being colored in. Or hopefully you can also see that I've got 2 pieces out of 6 being colored in. So each of these pairs of fractions are equivalent fractions. They mean the same thing. If I told you I ate half of a pizza, that's the same as me saying I ate 2/4 of the pizza. They mean exactly the same thing. Okay? In this question, we're asked to write 2 equivalent fractions for each fraction. We can actually have lots of different answers. If you wanted to try these by yourself, you might not get the exact same answers I do. So the first equivalent fraction I'm going to do is I'm going to times the top of my fraction and the bottom of my fraction by something. I'm going to times by 3, just because I like the number 3. And I end up with 3/6. So 3/6 is exactly the same as 1/2. I could try that again, and maybe I want to times the top and the bottom by 4 this time. And if I do that, I get 4 out of 8. So now I've got 1/2, 3/6, and 4/8. And all 3 of those fractions mean exactly the same thing. They all mean 1/2. All right, what about for 3/4? So what if I double the top and the bottom? I get 6 out of 8. So those 2 fractions are equivalent. What if I take the first fraction and I multiply by 10? Then I get 30 out of 40. And now all 3 of these fractions are all exactly the same. So I can simplify 6 out of 8 by dividing the top and bottom by 2 to give me 3/4. And I can also simplify 30 out of 40 by dividing the top and bottom both by 10 to give me 3/4 as well. Okay, can you think of any for 1/3? I'm thinking of 2/6, where I double the top and bottom. I'm also thinking of 3/9, where I triple the top and bottom. Okay, there's lots of other equivalent fractions that I could have. I could have an infinite amount of equivalent fractions, but these are the ones that I've written down. All right, do you remember how to write these mixed numbers as improper fractions? So an improper fraction is a fraction that has a bigger number on the top of the fraction than it does on the bottom. So it has a bigger numerator than denominator. So the first question is 5 and 1/2. 5 and 1/2. So we need to write that as an improper fraction. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the denominator, and then we're going to add on the numerator. So I've got 5 times by 2, which is 10, plus 1 more, which is 11. So I've got 11 halves, 11 over 2. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but 11 over 2 is actually the same as 5.5. And 5 and 1/2 is also the same as 5, and a half is 0.5. So these two things are exactly the same. We've just written one as a mixed number and one as an improper fraction, but both of them mean 5.5. All right, let's try this next one. The next one says 4 and 1/3. So again, we times by the bottom and we add the top. So 4 times by 3 is 12, plus 1 more is 13. So 13 thirds. All right. The next one we've got is 5 and 3/5. So again, we times by the bottom and add the top. 5 times 5 is 25, plus 3 more is 28. So 28 fifths. And 3 and 5/6, we times by the bottom and we add the top. 3 times by 6 is 18, plus 5 more is 23. 23 sixths. Now, you do need to know how to convert between mixed and improper fractions because it's going to make our life a lot easier when we're trying to add and subtract later in the week. All right, last thing from me today, we'd like to try to write these improper fractions as mixed numbers. So the first one is 6 over 4. So first thing we need to do is we need to find out how many 4s go into 6. So if I think about my times table, 4, 8, 12. Well, 4 goes in, that's definitely less than 6, but 8 is not. So it only goes in once. So I'm at 4, and I need to think how many are left over to get to 6. There would be 2 left over, and that would be out of 4. And there's my answer. I can actually make this answer look a lot nicer though. So right now it says 1 and 2/4, but I can simplify 1 and 2/4 to have 1 and a half, because I can divide the top of the fraction by 2 and the bottom of the fraction by 2. All right, let's try the next one. We've got 14 over 4. So if we continue with our times table that we wrote at the bottom, let's just rub out some parts of it. So we've got 4, 8, 12, 16. So we want to find out how many times does 4 go into 14. It goes in 4, 8, 12, and then 16 is too much. So if we're at 12, how many more do we need to get to 14? It goes in 3 times, because 4, 8, 12, and then there's 2 left over out of 4. So again, we can simplify that to be 3 and a half. All right, last question. Really big numbers here. I'm going to write my 30 times table just to help me out. 30, 60, 90, 120, 150. All right, that should probably be enough. All right, I need to ask myself, how many times does 30 go into 115? It goes in 1, 2, 3. This one's too big, so it goes in 3 times. And then I've got to find out how much is left over after 90 to get to 115. So 115, take away 90. That is 25 out of 30. Now I can tell right away that 25 and 30, they can be simplified because they're both in the 5 times table. So I can divide the top by 5 and divide the bottom by 5. And I end up with 3 and 5/6. Now you don't always have to simplify your mixed numbers, but in this case we did. It was just the kind of fractions that we had. They could be simplified further. That's pretty much all from me today. So go ahead and practice those questions and let me know if you have any questions by email. Okay, bye.